At a remote construction site, one worker quietly asks Dmitri about the strange new substance he has been distributing around town. Dmitri leads him into a hidden room and begins mixing a bright pink powder for injection. While preparing it, he suddenly realizes there are no clean needles left. Desperate, he rummages through the cluttered space until he discovers an old syringe lying inside a filthy sink. Without hesitation, Dmitri injects himself first. Moments later, his body gives out and he crashes to the floor, believing the reaction is temporary. The other worker uses the same needle and injects the substance into himself as well. Hours later, near evening, the man regains consciousness and notices Dmitri crouched in a corner, trembling violently and making disturbing, growling noises. When Dmitri slowly turns around, his eyes have become unnaturally red. He suddenly lunges forward and bites the terrified worker. Panicked, the injured man escapes the building and runs into the crowded area outside, unknowingly carrying the deadly infection with him and allowing it to spread further. Far away in the mountains, Dr. Adon decides to send his young son Miguel to stay with his grandparents for a week. Ever since the death of Adon's wife, life at home has become emotionally unbearable, and the temporary separation feels painful but necessary. Later that evening, Adon's neighbor Johnny invites him over for dinner. During the meal, Johnny's wife Anna apologizes for the small portions, explaining that pests have been destroying much of their farmland and crops. That night, after returning home, Adon lies in bed imagining his family together again. But the comforting memory quickly turns painful as he recalls the suffering his wife endured during her battle with cancer. The following morning, unable to let go, Adon calls his late wife's phone just to hear her recorded voicemail message one more time. Meanwhile, in the city, an unidentified injured man is rushed into a hospital after being hit by a vehicle. As medical staff wheel him toward the emergency room, he suddenly spits blood and saliva into a nurse's face. Witnesses nearby claim the man had been attacked and bitten by someone behaving violently in the street. Not long afterward, the infected nurse boards an airplane despite developing a severe cough, unknowingly placing countless passengers at risk. Elsewhere, Dr. Lucy, a specialist working with the World Health Organization, reviews a disturbing viral video circulating online. The footage shows a terrified family restraining a man to a bed because he has become dangerously unstable. His body shakes uncontrollably before he snaps the restraints apart and attacks the people around him. Soon after, Lucy is summoned to an emergency briefing where officials begin examining a troubling medical report recently sent from a hospital in Venezuela. According to the medical report, one patient has developed symptoms unlike anything doctors have previously encountered. Before the footage can reveal more information, the video suddenly cuts out with heavy interference. Shortly after, Lucy's superior explains that the United Nations has officially classified the situation as a level 4 global emergency. Meanwhile, at a crowded supermarket, Dr. Adon notices that shelves are already being emptied as panic spreads through the city. In the middle of the chaos, a store employee suddenly urges him to chase after a thief who has just escaped with supplies. Adon follows the commotion outside, where he discovers an ambulance that has violently crashed into the street. As bystanders rush closer to help, a blood-covered man suddenly bursts out from the wreckage and attacks a civilian, tearing into him in a horrifying frenzy. The terrifying scene confirms that the mysterious infection is transforming victims into violent zombie-like creatures. A frightened man nearby pulls out a gun and warns everyone not to touch the infected attacker because the disease spreads through contact. Moments later, a police officer arrives and orders the armed civilian to drop the weapon. Before the situation can calm down, another infected victim crawls out of the ambulance and attacks the officer from behind. At the same time, a nearby building erupts into flames after a massive explosion shakes the area. Realizing the city is collapsing into chaos, Adon races back to his car. As he tries to escape, one of the infected suddenly blocks his path, forcing him to slam the vehicle into reverse before speeding away. During the drive home, Adon repeatedly tries calling his son Miguel, but none of the calls connect. On the road, he eventually encounters Johnny carrying Anna in his arms. She appears almost lifeless, and Johnny explains that she became sick shortly after being bitten by someone earlier. Adon quickly brings them to his medical office and examines the injury. Anna desperately pleads for help, but while speaking, her voice slowly changes into an unsettling growl. Fearing the worst, Adon injects her with a sedative that finally puts her to sleep. Afterward, he attempts to contact Miguel's grandparents, but communication networks continue failing. Concerned about the outbreak, Adon searches online for updates about the strange virus spreading through Venezuela. News reports reveal that infections have already appeared across multiple regions, while doctors urge citizens to remain indoors until authorities understand the disease better. Not long later, Johnny arrives at Adon's house with Anna because her condition has rapidly worsened. Soon, two worried neighbors also stop by to check on her. During another examination, Adon notices disturbing physical changes, including sharp mutated teeth and glowing red eyes. Without warning, Anna suddenly wakes up and violently lunges toward him. Everyone nearby struggles to restrain her as she thrashes uncontrollably. In the middle of the struggle, she manages to bite one of the neighbors before he stumbles back in pain. Adon immediately takes his place beside Johnny, and together they force Anna down while she continues fighting like a wild animal. After an intense struggle, she loses balance and crashes against a table, striking her head hard enough to finally knock herself unconscious again. After recording a desperate message on his mother-in-law's voicemail, Johnny carefully wraps bandages around the neighbor's bite wound, hoping it will slow the infection. Trying to gather information, he switches on the radio, but every station has been replaced by the same emergency broadcast. The announcement warns citizens to remain inside their homes at all costs. It explains that anyone showing symptoms such as high fever, violent behavior, hallucinations, or extreme aggression must be isolated immediately, while family members are instructed to contact emergency services without delay. Only moments later, the internet connection suddenly disappears across the area, cutting the group off from outside communication. In the middle of the growing panic, Adon receives a call from his longtime friend Carlos, who works at a medical laboratory that was recently evacuated by authorities. Carlos reveals that he and several researchers are now trapped inside a military-controlled base located outside the city limits. Knowing the situation is rapidly spiraling out of control, Carlos sends Adon the exact coordinates of the location and begs him to come as soon as possible, explaining that they urgently need additional medical help. Before ending the call, Carlos reveals even more disturbing news. The entire city has officially been placed under quarantine, and soldiers have been ordered to eliminate anyone infected on site to stop the outbreak from spreading further. Suddenly, the call cuts off without warning. As Adon explains everything to the others, the electricity throughout the house abruptly dies, plunging the building into darkness. Seconds later, military aircraft roar across the night sky overhead, making it clear that the government has already begun large-scale emergency operations. Realizing there is no longer any safe place left to stay, the group agrees they must leave together and travel to the military base in hopes of finding treatment for Anna before her condition becomes completely irreversible. At the same time, Adon's father-in-law, Angel, decides to check on a nearby neighbor after noticing unusual silence around the house. He carefully searches through every room, but the place appears completely empty. Eventually, he steps into the backyard and discovers the horrifying truth. The neighbor is sitting lifeless in a chair. From the scene around him, it becomes clear the man chose to end his own life rather than risk transforming into one of the infected creatures. Disturbed by what he witnessed, Angel returns home and quietly tells his wife Tina about the incident, not realizing that young Miguel overhears the entire conversation from nearby. Fearing the outbreak is spreading closer, Angel firmly warns Tina not to leave the house or open the door for anyone under any circumstances. Almost immediately after, the electricity suddenly shuts off, leaving the home in complete darkness. Meanwhile, several hours into their journey, Adon and the others encounter a burning vehicle abandoned in the middle of the road. They carefully steer around the wreckage and continue driving deeper into the isolated area. A short distance later, however, their path is blocked again, this time by armed soldiers guarding a checkpoint. The troops fire warning shots into the ground and order the vehicle to stop, announcing that the zone has been placed under strict military control and nobody is allowed to pass. Hidden within the nearby forest, a large group of infected creatures hears the gunfire and immediately begins rushing toward the checkpoint. Adon steps out of the vehicle and desperately explains that he is a doctor, hoping the soldiers will let them through. The soldiers then order everyone else to exit the car as well. Before anyone can react, Anna suddenly bursts out in a fully transformed state. The soldiers instantly open fire, killing her before she can attack. In the chaos, the two frightened neighbors are also caught in the gunfire and killed. Devastated, Johnny tries to run toward Anna, but Adon grabs him and forces him back into the vehicle as the infected horde erupts from the forest and overwhelms the checkpoint. As Adon and Johnny speed away, the creatures swarm the soldiers and brutally attack them. Even Anna, now completely consumed by the infection, joins the feeding frenzy alongside the other infected. During the drive, Johnny struggles to process what happened to his wife. Overcome with grief and anger, he finally demands that Adon stop the car. Johnny storms out and repeatedly punches the vehicle in frustration before announcing that he is going back to save Anna. Adon argues that there is nothing left to save, but Johnny refuses to listen and begins walking away into the darkness. Left with no other choice, Adon returns to the driver's seat and silently waits. After a few tense moments alone, Johnny finally realizes the hopelessness of the situation. Defeated and emotionally shattered, he slowly turns around and climbs back into the car beside Adon. Meanwhile, Lucy finally reaches the military research facility, where Carlos introduces her to the first confirmed infected subject, the drug addict connected to the beginning of the outbreak. The patient is heavily restrained as doctors study the terrifying effects of the infection, hoping to understand how the virus spreads so quickly. Elsewhere by sunrise, Adon and Johnny continue their journey through roads filled with destruction and panic. Highways are completely jammed with abandoned vehicles, while desperate survivors fight and rob one another for food, fuel, and supplies. Among the chaos, infected creatures race through the streets hunting terrified civilians. Several frightened people beg Adon to stop and help them, but realizing there is no safe way to save everyone, he drives off the main road and focuses only on escaping. At the same time, television broadcasts reveal that the country's president and government officials are preparing to flee. leaving citizens behind as society rapidly collapses. In another nearby town, a frightened family hides silently inside their home while groups of infected sprint through the streets outside. The parents desperately try to keep calm as the creatures pound against nearby buildings. After several unbearable moments, the infected suddenly smash through the windows and violently attack the mother and father. Their son, Luis, barely manages to escape through the back entrance before the creatures can reach him. Using a bicycle, Luis rides away from the town as fast as possible, trying to outrun the spreading nightmare. Later, while Adon and Johnny stop on the roadside to replace a damaged tire, they notice Luis speeding past them on his bike. Believing the teenager may know a safer route forward, they quickly return to the car and follow him down the road. Their plan almost fails moments later when Luis loses control of the bicycle and crashes onto the pavement. Hearing the noise, nearby infected immediately begin chasing him. Terrified, Luis screams for help as the creatures close in behind him. Adon and Johnny pull the car beside him and throw open the door just in time. Luis jumps inside, and the trio speeds away before the infected can catch them. As night arrives, however, the vehicle finally runs out of fuel, forcing the group to continue their journey on foot through the dark wilderness. The following morning, they entered another deserted town. At first, they spot what appears to be a normal man standing quietly behind a fence. But when he slowly turns around, they realize he has already transformed into one of the infected. Without stopping, the group moves deeper into town and eventually arrives at an abandoned gas station, where they discover the body of a dead police officer lying beside his patrol car. Without warning, two infected creatures suddenly leap out from nearby and attack the group. Adon and Johnny are knocked to the ground as they desperately struggle to keep the zombies from biting them. Seeing no other option, Luis grabs the fallen police officer's handgun and fires at the attackers, killing both creatures before they can overpower the men. The loud gunshots immediately echo through the empty streets, catching the attention of a family hiding inside a nearby hotel. Unfortunately, the noise also draws even more infected toward the area. Realizing they are about to be surrounded, the group sprints down the street while dozens of zombies begin chasing them. As they pass the hotel entrance, a man named Jose suddenly opens the door and pulls them inside. At the same time, his wife climbs onto the rooftop and throws random objects into the street to distract the infected long enough for everyone to escape. Once the situation calms down, Jose allows the exhausted survivors to rest inside the hotel for the night. He explains that by morning they will need to search the area for clean water and supplies before the infected become more active again. Adon agrees to help temporarily, but makes it clear that he cannot stay long because finding his son Miguel remains his top priority. Elsewhere, the following morning, a military aircraft flies low above Tina's house. Curious, Miguel walks toward the window to watch it pass overhead. Suddenly, an infected creature smashes through the opening and reaches for the boy. At that exact moment, Adon jolts awake, realizing the terrifying scene was only a nightmare caused by stress and fear for his family's safety. Moments later, however, he hears disturbing noises coming from elsewhere in the building. When he investigates, he discovers several infected roaming through the hotel corridors. The creatures instantly charge toward him, forcing Adon to run into a nearby room and barricade the door. He struggles to hold it shut, but the infected proves far stronger than expected and eventually crashes inside anyway. In desperation, Adon grabs a metal pipe and repeatedly strikes the creature until it finally stops moving. He then jams the pipe against the door as another infected person continues slamming against it from outside. With no safe exit left, Adon notices a weak section of the wall and begins smashing through it until he creates an opening large enough to crawl through into the next room. When he peers into the hallway, several more infected are already approaching. With nowhere left to hide, he takes off running through the building as the creatures chase after him. The pursuit leads all the way to the rooftop, where Adon quickly grabs loose wooden planks to defend himself. He knocks one infected unconscious and shoves another over the edge of the roof. Just as a third creature is about to bite him, a gunshot suddenly rings out. The infected collapses instantly after being shot by Jose's daughter, Cristal, who has arrived just in time to save him. Since neither of them knows what happened to the others during the chaos, Cristal and Adon cautiously head back downstairs together to search the hotel for survivors. After discovering blood smeared across the hallway walls, Adon and Cristal carefully make their way into the hotel courtyard, where they finally encounter Jose and his wife emerging from a small storage room outside. Jose explains that he has completely run out of ammunition. He also reveals that Johnny and Luis managed to hide inside a secured room behind a fenced area. Before escaping, he spotted another child fleeing from the infected and taking shelter inside one of the nearby utility rooms. Determined to save the boy, Adon and Jose decide to cross the fence while the women remain behind to secure the gate. As soon as Adon steps into the overgrown grass, an infected creature suddenly lunges toward him from hiding. He sprints across the yard while the zombie chases close behind. Reaching the shelter just in time, Johnny unlocks the door and pulls him inside. The infected continues attacking from outside, but Johnny forces a blade through a crack in the door and repeatedly stabs the creature until it finally collapses. Inside the room, Adon discovers that Luis injured his leg during the escape. With no medical supplies available, Adon forces the teenager to bite down on his shirt before painfully pushing the broken bone back into place and wrapping the leg as tightly as possible. Meanwhile, Jose successfully finds the frightened child and begins leading him back toward the fence. Unfortunately, another infected notices them and starts chasing them across the yard. With nowhere else to go, Jose and the child rush into a nearby room and slam the door shut behind them. But the infected repeatedly smashes against the entrance until it finally breaks through. The creature attacks both of them before they can escape. Seeing the chaos unfold, Jose's wife rushes forward in panic to help her husband, only to be attacked by another infected herself moments later. Crystal wants to save her family, but another zombie suddenly begins chasing her across the courtyard. She escapes through the nearest window, races through the building, and eventually reaches the fence again, where she quickly locks it behind her. When Adon, Johnny, and Luis finally emerge from hiding, Crystal pretends she is unharmed. But within seconds, an infected person reaches through the fence and bites her on the shoulder. Terrified, Crystal runs away from the others and locks herself inside a nearby room, emotionally collapsing as the reality of the infection sinks in. Moments later, several infected smash through the windows and overwhelm her before the others can intervene. With no way to fight back against the growing horde, the remaining survivors retreat to their room and wait out the night in silence. The next morning, Adon and Johnny help the injured Luis travel toward the nearby gas station. Once there, Adon begins siphoning fuel from an abandoned vehicle in hopes of getting their car running again. While working, he suddenly hears motorcycles approaching and quickly hides beneath the car. A dangerous-looking gang arrives at the station and briefly searches the area. Luckily, they fail to notice the survivors hiding nearby and eventually ride away. After the threat passes, Adon and the others return to their vehicle, refill the fuel tank, and finally continue their journey down the deserted road. Meanwhile, back at the house, Tina anxiously waits for Angel to return from searching for food and supplies. The moment she spots him outside, she rushes toward the entrance to let him in. However, Angel urgently tells her not to open the door. He reveals that he was bitten during the trip and fears he may already be infected. Before he can explain further, he suddenly begins coughing violently and collapses onto the ground outside the house. Terrified and emotional, Tina ignores his warning and opens the door to reach him. Elsewhere, deep into the night, Adon realizes they may have lost their route completely. He stops the vehicle and leaves briefly to search the surrounding area for signs, landmarks, or anything that could help them find the military base. While he is gone, nearby infected creatures notice the parked car and quickly surround it from all sides. Johnny desperately fights them off by slamming the car door into approaching zombies, while Louis struggles to restart the engine in panic. At that moment, Adon comes sprinting back toward the vehicle and fires his weapon at the infected. Unfortunately, he only has a single bullet remaining, and the shot misses completely. Within seconds, the creatures smash through the windows and grab Luis, biting him before anyone can pull him away. Realizing the car is no longer safe, Adon and Johnny abandon the vehicle and flee into the forest as the infected chase after them through the darkness. After a long and exhausting escape, the two men suddenly reach a wide clearing where powerful floodlights abruptly switch on around them. Gunfire immediately erupts from every direction as soldiers hidden nearby eliminate the pursuing infected creatures. To their shock and relief, Adon and Johnny finally discover they have reached the military base Carlos described earlier. Armed soldiers quickly surround the exhausted survivors and demand identification. Adon explains that he is a doctor and personally knows Carlos, hoping the information will earn their trust. Even so, the commanding officer refuses to take chances. Before allowing them inside the secure area, the soldiers force both men to strip for a full inspection to confirm they have not been bitten or infected. After completing a strict decontamination process, Adon and Johnny are finally allowed inside the military facility. As they move through the camp, they notice massive fires burning across an open field nearby. Carlos explains that the military has been collecting and burning infected bodies in an attempt to slow the spread of the outbreak and prevent further contamination. Soon after, Carlos introduces Adon to Lucy, who is monitoring live news broadcasts showing violent riots, looting, and total chaos spreading throughout the country. Believing Adon's medical experience could be valuable, Carlos insists that he stay and assist with the research being conducted at the base. But Adon refuses, explaining that his only priority is finding his son before it is too late. Carlos becomes frustrated and warns him that leaving the facility would be almost suicidal because they are dangerously close to the center of the outbreak. Meanwhile, Lucy shows Adon samples of the infection under a microscope and explains that the virus appears to be a mutated form of rabies. While examining patient Zero's medical records, Adon discovers evidence that the infected man consumed an unknown substance shortly before his transformation began. From this, Adon develops a new theory. The man may have already been carrying rabies, and the mysterious drug somehow triggered a deadly mutation that created the new infection. The research team immediately begins conducting tests to verify the possibility. As Adon studies the infected samples more carefully, he suddenly notices something unusual. Every confirmed infected subject so far has been an adult. He realizes he has not seen a single infected child since the outbreak began. Before anyone can discuss the discovery further, alarms erupt throughout the base. A massive horde of infected suddenly crashes through the perimeter defenses, forcing soldiers to open fire in every direction. Despite the heavy gunfire, the infected continue pouring into the camp in overwhelming numbers. panic spreads among the troops as defenses collapse and soldiers begin abandoning their positions. The captain remains behind with only a handful of men, desperately trying to hold the line long enough for civilians and scientists to escape. During the chaos, one infected chases a scientist into a nearby tent, accidentally triggering an explosion that sends flames through part of the camp. Johnny finally reunites with Adon and the research team, immediately demanding a weapon to defend himself. However, the soldiers refuse to arm civilians even as the situation spirals out of control. With the base falling apart, the captain and 2 remaining soldiers guide Adon, Johnny, Carlos, Lucy, and the others through the forest in an attempt to escape. Along the way, Adon and Johnny are horrified to discover that one of the infected roaming through the camp is Luis. The teenager is now fully transformed, though his broken leg prevents him from properly chasing them. As the survivors disappear deeper into the woods, screams and gunfire echo behind them while the military base is completely overrun. By the following morning, the exhausted group finally reaches an empty road far away from the destroyed camp. As the survivors continue down the road, one of the soldiers suddenly spots an infected creature emerging nearby. He immediately raises his weapon and kills it with a single gunshot. But during the attack, the zombie manages to bite him. Realizing he has already been infected, the soldier refuses to risk the lives of the others. Without hesitation, he drops his equipment and runs away from the group before the transformation can begin. The remaining survivors stop to discuss their next move, hoping to find outside assistance. Adon urges Lucy to contact the World Health Organization and request emergency extraction or support. Lucy sadly explains that no help is coming. According to the latest reports, national borders have already been sealed, and international agencies can no longer safely enter the region. Carlos then admits he already knew the situation was hopeless. He reveals that his own family was evacuated with other civilians more than a week earlier, meaning the people left behind are completely on their own now. Determined to stop the outbreak, somehow, Carlos insists they must travel to a scientific research institute where they might still be able to develop a cure or treatment for the virus. The captain disagrees strongly, arguing that survival should come first and that they need to reach another military base instead. The disagreement quickly turns into a heated argument. During the tension, Johnny quietly takes the infected soldier's abandoned weapon for protection. The situation becomes even more dangerous when the furious captain suddenly attacks Carlos and violently injures his hand. Seeing this, Johnny immediately points the gun at the captain, while another soldier raises his weapon toward Johnny in response. Trying to calm everyone down, Carlos argues that military protection means nothing if humanity never finds a cure for the infection. Adon then asks the captain a simple but personal question: whether he still has family out there somewhere waiting to survive. The question finally breaks through the captain's anger. After a long pause, he lowers his hostility and reluctantly agrees to travel toward the research institute alongside the others. Even so, Adon cannot stop thinking about Miguel. Believing his son may still be alive, he decides he must continue searching for him personally. Before leaving, he hands responsibility for protecting the group to Johnny, takes a firearm for defense, and sets off alone into the devastated countryside. Sometime later, Adon cautiously walks through an abandoned town filled with silence and empty streets. Suddenly, he notices a van slowly approaching him, causing him to freeze in place. A man and his elderly mother step out of the vehicle and kindly offer him water and assistance. Exhausted, but suspicious of strangers after everything he has experienced, Adon politely refuses the offer and continues on his way alone. The stranger becomes offended after Adon refuses the offer of help and angrily calls him ungrateful. Moments later, the man reaches into the van to grab a gun. Fearing he is about to be attacked, Adon reacts instantly and fires first, killing the man before he can raise the weapon. The elderly woman screams in horror over her son's death and desperately grabs the gun herself, trying to retaliate. But Adon shoots her as well before she can pull the trigger. Shaken by what he has done, Adon searches the van for supplies and water. While checking the vehicle, he suddenly hears muffled noises coming from the back. When he opens the rear doors, he discovers the van's real owners tied up inside. He quickly unties the trapped couple and helps them out. At first, Adon plans to continue alone, but the couple repeatedly begs him not to abandon them. Eventually, he reluctantly agrees to travel together for safety. Using the van, the trio manages to leave the dangerous town much faster than before. However, after some time on the road, they are forced to stop when the woman suddenly becomes sick and vomits beside the vehicle. Concerned she may be infected, Adon examines her carefully. Thankfully, he finds no signs of the virus. The woman then quietly reveals that she is pregnant. While Adon is distracted during the conversation, two infected creatures suddenly attack from behind and bite both members of the couple before anyone can react. Adon opens fire immediately, but he is already too late to save them. With no hope left, he is forced to put them down before the infection spreads further. Trying to escape once again, Adon climbs into the van, only to discover the engine will not start. As more infected begin approaching the area, he abandons the vehicle and disappears into the nearby woods. Meanwhile, Johnny and the remaining survivors encounter problems of their own when their car suddenly breaks down in the middle of the road. As they search desperately for another way out, they notice two horses sprinting wildly through the street. Realizing the animals are fleeing from danger, the group immediately starts running as well. Seconds later, a massive horde of infected bursts out behind them and gives chase through the town. The survivors race toward the outskirts, but discover the road ahead blocked by a large fence. Worse still, every firearm they carry has run out of ammunition. Understanding that someone must stay behind, the captain orders the others to continue without him while he distracts the horde. The infected quickly swarm him from every direction. As they overwhelm him, the captain pulls the pin from a grenade and sacrifices himself in a massive explosion that destroys both him and many of the pursuing creatures. The sacrifice gives Johnny, Lucy, Carlos, and the others enough time to reach the scientific institute. Unfortunately, when they arrive, they discover the main entrance is locked shut. During the panic, Carlos trips on the stairs, and one of the infected immediately jumps on him. Just as the creature is about to kill him, a security guard appears behind the entrance and hesitates to open the door for strangers. Lucy quickly identifies herself as a representative of the World Health Organization and begs to be allowed inside. When the guard notices an entire horde approaching from behind the survivors, he finally unlocks the entrance and pulls them into the institute moments before the infected reach them. Sometime later, Adon finally arrives at his in-laws' house, hoping against all odds that Miguel is still alive inside. The moment he bangs on the front door, a horrifying figure suddenly appears behind the glass. Angel has already transformed into one of the infected. The creature smashes through the window and desperately tries to reach Adon. Shocked and emotionally destroyed, Adon struggles to aim his weapon. Fighting through tears, he finally gathers enough courage to shoot Angel and end his suffering. Overwhelmed with grief, Adon breaks down outside the house before forcing himself to continue searching for Miguel. Inside, he discovers Tina's lifeless body, confirming that the infection reached the entire family. The heartbreaking sight leaves him devastated once again. Refusing to give up, Adon searches every room in the house until he reaches a locked door. He violently kicks it open and finally finds Miguel hiding inside. But the relief only lasts a moment. Miguel quietly reveals that he was bitten the previous day. Trying to stay calm for his son's sake, Adon promises everything will be alright even though he fears the worst. He then takes Miguel and escapes using his grandparents' car. By evening, the two reach a road far outside the city. There, a woman suddenly steps into the road and begs them to stop and help. As soon as Adon pulls over, several bodies lying nearby suddenly rise from the ground. They are not infected at all, but armed survivors use injured people as bait to rob travelers. One of the women notices Miguel's bite wound and immediately assumes he is infected. Without hesitation, she opens fire toward the car. The bullet strikes Adon, causing him to collapse unconscious, while two women drag Miguel away from the vehicle. As his vision fades, Adon hears another vehicle arriving nearby and someone calling out his name. Sometime later, Adon wakes up inside a hospital. He soon learns that researchers finally discovered something extraordinary. Children younger than 10 years old are naturally immune to the mutated virus. Because of this discovery, scientists used Miguel's blood to develop a treatment capable of stopping the infection. The cure is now being distributed across the country, and little by little, society is beginning to recover from the devastating outbreak. Even so, the political situation remains unstable, and many survivors continue struggling against corruption and government failures that worsened the disaster in the first place. Wanting to honor a promise he once made to his late wife about traveling together someday, Adon eventually takes Miguel to the airport. As they board a plane and prepare to leave, countless other survivors can be seen walking toward distant borders in search of safety and a new beginning. However, despite the cure, many foreign countries remain fearful of the outbreak and continue treating refugees and immigrants with suspicion. And that's how Adon's terrifying journey through a world destroyed by infection finally comes to an end. From losing his family to risking everything for his son, he never gave up hope, even when humanity was collapsing around him. If you enjoyed this movie recap, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and tell us in the comments what you would do in a zombie outbreak situation. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more intense movie recaps, horror stories, and survival films every week. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.